DraftKings wide receiver analysis for week 6. I'm Jason Gilbo, JGilbo11. With me is Justin Elick at Big Illy 42. You did the wide receivers this week, obviously GPP, cash and value, per usual. We'll jump things off with Antonio Brown. I think there's it's a hot topic, not only because, obviously he's a great play every week, but 10K, it's up there.
Yeah, it's the highest. I don't know for certain that it's the highest tag we've seen for any wide receiver over the years, but it's definitely up there. I want to say we saw Julio at 10K a year or two ago, but either way, crazy expensive price tag. But this is just an ideal matchup for Antonio Brown. There's no such thing as a bad matchup for him, but he's going to see just straight garbage in coverage. Byron Maxwell and Tony Lippett. It's going to be an easy day for him. The only concern there really is potentially the weather, but we've seen it from Antonio Brown. He doesn't need to catch the ball 30 yards down the field to make plays. He's a great red zone target. He can turn any play into a big play. We can just kind of leave this one where it's at. He's the best player in the best matchup. If you can afford him, play him. You don't have to play him in cash games. He's not a must play. But if that weather cooperates and he goes for a big Antonio Brown, $170, 2-3 touchdown, or $170, 170 yards, 2 or 3 touchdowns, and you faded him, then you're going to be wishing you had paid that price tag.
Yeah, especially with all the other guys banged up this week. Or in tough matchups, as you put. Julio Jones, obviously, on the road at Seattle. AJ Green, tough matchup against the Patriots, who's more of a GPP play than cash. But yeah, Tony Lippett, it's comical that's where we've come to. It's week 6, and that's where we're at. That's a week 17 move.
Yeah, seriously. That's like let's see what we've got so that we don't have to cut this guy. Hopefully he can pan out in a different position. It's ugly. Now that I say that, watch him just turn into – no, never mind. I'm not even going to speculate. He's going to get dominated. It's going to be ugly.
Doug Baldwin, we take a good step down in terms of salary at 6,500. Pretty good matchup against Falcons defense. That's just been horrible this year.
Yeah, this is a spot where I feel like people, due to the weather, once again, are kind of scared off this team a little bit. Outside of Christian Michael and maybe Russell Wilson, but this is a really good spot for this team against a defense that's not nearly as good as what they looked like last week. That was more a product of bad offense by the Broncos. Obviously, the Falcons didn't play poorly by any means, but this is not a scenario we're going to see again. And this is one of the better, more potent offenses in the league now that Jimmy Graham's contributing. You've got Doug Baldwin on the outside. Russell Wilson looks healthy. Christian Michael. He's not Marshawn Lynch, but he's doing a lot with the touches that he's getting. So, all of a sudden you got an Atlanta team that's bottom 10 against the run and the pass, facing off against this team. So Doug Baldwin luckily runs a lot of his routes out of the slot, so probably will miss Desmond Trufant at least for most of the game. I guess I'm speculating on that, assuming that he's going to run most out of the slot. But, I tend to think that more of his routes will be away from Trufant than anything. So I think that he's just in a good spot. And for a guy that's easily a top 20 receiver, probably even top 15 in the league, he never seems to be priced like it. So I think he makes for a nice, safe option here.
And I think you look at this team total, it's like if there was any weather concerns at all, we'd see a little bit of a drop. It's, here we are on Friday afternoon. We haven't really seen anything. Obviously, weather can change at any minute, but, we still really haven't seen a team total. So drop, I like it quite a bit. I like firing away with a lot of those Seahawks options.
Yeah.
GPP wide receivers, Allen Robinson, 7,800 against a Bears secondary that's banged up and just overall not good.
Yeah, Matt Stafford tried to make them look good a couple weeks ago, but that's another one of those ones like we're talking about the Atlanta game last week, kind of an outlier. This Bears defense is not as good as they looked in that game. That was, again, kind of a product of the opposing team not playing well. But, now we've got Allen Robinson, who is starting to look more like the Allen Robinson that we saw last year. It was never an issue of targets. The guy's always heavily targeted, 15 the first game, only 5 the second game, but last 2 back to his normal amount of targets, 10 and 11. Only caught 12 of those for 112 yards, but 3 touchdowns is the encouraging part there. And, this is a spot where he's going to see a ton of looks. I kind of expect this one to be a shootout. Neither defense looks like they're a bottom third defense, but I'm a believer that they both truly are and will be by the end of the season. So, the clear number one, this isn't a situation like last year where we saw Alan Hearns having those big games, stealing some looks from Robinson. I mean, 2 for 47 and a touchdown last week was pretty much the best game that he's had. So, I mean, it's Allen Robinson, clear number one, and Alan Hearns this year is just the clear number 2 option.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I like Robinson in all formats for me. I just think in terms of obviously a price down option from Brown and some other guys there. I do like his price a little bit more here on DraftKings than I do on FanDuel. Brandon Cooks, you're talking about. Obviously, you highlight Michael Thomas as a value. This Panthers secondary is just, I don't even know what word to. Yeah, putrid. It's a good word to it. The putrid Panthers.
Yeah, I mean they're bad. It's crazy how I know Josh Norman thinks that it's all him, and I mean a lot of it is him. But this defense is all of a sudden one of the worst secondaries in the league, maybe even the worst overall. And now they're going to face what's ultimately one of the toughest matchups in the league on the road against the Saints at the Superdome. So, Michael Thomas, like I mentioned, 4,300. He's probably going to see a decent amount of ownership here as a value play. Not a guy that I love, but I mean, if you're going to go cheap, you play him. But certainly going to have a higher ownership than a guy like Cooks, who, when there's a lot of people, the casual players look at recency bias and they look at the game logs. And, Brandon Cooks had that monster first game, 2 touchdowns, 143 yards. Last 3 weeks, really struggled, but I think it's been more of a product of the offense struggling than him struggling personally. So I think this is a really good bounce back spot for Brandon Cooks. His price is kind of depressed a little bit. And I mean, he's still seeing a good amount of targets. So I think this is a spot where Brandon Cooks is going to just have another monster game.
When you look at Cooks, I mean, Cooks fared well against Carolina last year, and that was with Josh Norman. I mean, he's had some success against them in the past. And just with their numbers against wide receiver ones, I mean, I like Cooks quite a bit. Value wideouts, Tavon Austin, 3,900 at the Lions. He's much more in play here on DraftKings. I mean, that's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's still an okay tournament option on FanDuel, but on DraftKings, full point PPR, $3,900. Obviously minimum salary is $3,000, so he's only $900 above that. I mean, I think he's a guy with a really nice floor in this matchup, and he still sees 9 targets a game. Granted, probably only about 5 of those are catchable balls from Case Keenum, but the good thing about Tavon Austin is he doesn't see a lot of looks down the field. It's a lot of short passing game. He gets end arounds, wide receiver screens, things like that. And I mean, that's kind of the way that you need to utilize him, especially with the ridiculous amount of money they gave him, is you just need to get the ball in his hands and let him go to work, because he's not a big target. But he's fast and he's elusive and he's tough to bring down. So, I imagine that they're going to get really creative this week and find Rob Boris is going to find a way to get him the ball in space where he can. And, if they're going to win this game and keep pace with that Lions offensive attack, I guess probably all passing attack now, it seems, with those injuries, they're going to need Austin to make some big plays.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that defense. I mean, the matchup is certainly there for Austin to do some damage. Team total there sitting around basically 3 touchdowns. I'd have to imagine that Austin's a part of at least one.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly should be. And I mean, there's not a single player outside of Todd Gurley you even have a little bit of faith in on this Rams side either. So, it's if you want to try to take advantage of the good matchup, he's kind of your only option.
Yeah. Next one here, talk about Kamar Aiken. Obviously, we're dealing with a pretty significant injury to, well, not significant, but a significant situation to Baltimore's kind of wide receiver core with Steve Smith being out. Haven't seen Mike Wallace, but he could be out as well. So that puts Aiken and Perryman possibly in play.
Yeah, and I mean, looks like Ravens will be missing 2 guys off the offensive line as well. So not a particularly potent running attack anyway, but you got to imagine this is one of those scenarios where, Joe Flacco is going to be forced to throw the ball 40-plus times. And Kamar Aiken, we saw it last year. He had almost 130 targets. And, in games that after Steve Smith was injured, targets 14, 8, 10, 11, 7, 12, 8, and 13. Obviously, Brashad Perriman and his awesome hairline that you pointed out to me. He's here this year. He was injured last year, obviously wasn't there. But, that's a guy that people think is probably going to take away some targets, but I think it's easily going to be Kamar Aiken. I think he sees 8 to 10 targets in this one, and I don't think he has huge upside here. But, I mean, he had over 100 yards in, I think, 3 different games last year. So, this is a guy that has potential, and he's min salary. So, if you want to go with some bigger stacks here, get in some Antonio Brown types, maybe an expensive quarterback. You lock in a couple of these cheap wide receivers, and even if they don't do much, 4 for 40 type game really isn't going to kill you at min salary.
That's the thing. I mean, you look at these guys, and it seems like if you're using a Brown, you're going to kind of need to go this route to balance out that salary. You look at that, it'd bait, $13K for those two guys combined.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you could even go with Austin and Aiken if you wanted, and I mean, you can load up anywhere.
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of different intriguing kind of GPP moves this week in terms of using those value guys.
Yep.
That's going to wrap it up with the DraftKings wide receiver analysis for Week 6. Be sure to head on over to dailyfantasycafe.com. Check out the rest of our Week 6 content.